introduction, Andrew. My name is Cameron Hurd, and I'm here in Los Angeles, California, talking about the situation around many lynchings which have shaken this country, as well as this city, as well as just millions of people across the world. There's one story in particular that I'll be focusing on, which is the horrendous murder of Robert Leroy Fuller Jr. For people who aren't familiar with LA County, I wanted to start by giving a little bit of context to the areas we're talking about. So Palmdale is a city on the more rural northern outskirts of Los Angeles County. There's been a major exodus, a major leaving of South Los Angeles, Long Beach, and other places that are historically Black LA since the 1980s, and people have moved toward places like Antelope Valley, which holds Palmdale, many other small towns as well. Now, in order to keep those racial hierarchies in force, there's been a slew of racist housing laws, segregation, and white supremacist violence. The murderous Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department oversees Palmdale as well. And the Palmdale station has huge amounts of resources, one of the best founded areas in the country as far as police go. Driving through Palmdale and Lancaster, you might see a higher rate of Confederate flags that remind me of life in Virginia. And it's a common reminder of the way that white supremacy and anti-Blackness were foundational in the U.S. takeover of the West Coast. You see a shift when you're going through Palmdale from the nicer white neighborhoods with no trash on the streets, beautiful homes and schools, toward the Black neighborhoods where the vast wealth of this society never reached these corners. Now, about Robert's case. Palmdale was having their own actions to demand justice for George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and the countless others, as well as an end to police violence. Youth and elders were participating in peaceful marches like one outside of Antelope Valley Mall, asking the same questions and demanding the same answers as millions of other people across this country. The popular uprising brought deeper consciousness and political understanding to Palmdale. On the morning of Wednesday, June 10th, which is about 2 weeks since the mass uprising started here in Los Angeles County, there was a 911 call reporting that a Black man, was found hanging from a tree in Ponticlan Square near Palmdale City Hall. That man's name was Robert Leroy Fuller Jr. The people of these cities were already politically engaged in the first weeks of this struggle, but the discovery of a lynching shook the community and pushed them past the breaking point toward building people's power. The sheriff started off by ruling it as a suicide. Friday was the first protest against this nonsense, where over 100 people marched to the sheriff's station to demand answers about the Robert Fuller case. Why would a person with no suicidal intentions, leaving no suicide note behind, decide to hang himself in one area where they're saying there was no cameras in the middle of a park square? It made no sense to the community. It still doesn't make sense now. But on Saturday, there was an even more militant, even larger protest of over 2,000 people. On that day, we learned that Catherine Barger from the local government requested a task force for a deeper investigation, and soon even the FBI was investigating the situation. By Monday and Tuesday, the Palmdale government and the coroner finally retracted their statements, calling it a death by suicide, and that is pending further investigation. That was won through people's struggle. The sheriffs tried their best to sweep this whole situation under the rug, just call it a suicide and move on, as they have done historically, but the community refused to let that happen. Whereas in countless small towns over the past hundreds of years, these lynchings can be covered up by intimidation. The people of Palmdale became fearless. They demanded answers, and they demanded that this government change the nature of this horrible report that came out calling it a suicide. And I want to say that there's many different types of lynchings, but the key thing that makes them lynchings is the political nature and the gruesome violence that is used. This is a part of a white supremacist reaction to this reinvigorated Black Power movement, the rebellion of African people across this country. Every time we've stood up and rebelled, we faced lynchings, beatings, harassment, and intimidation. A lot of us have been flooded with videos of police violence, harassment, intimidation, and murders. George Floyd's tape, the taped murder actually allowed us to have a window into his last terrifying moments. It filled me with a hot rage and a burning desire to get out into the streets and march. But this Robert Fuller case brings about another type of lynching. Those that are done in the dark, in silence, with no cameras, only the scarred remains of a person that was previously full of life, energy, and vitality. That fills me with a cold rage and a need to change things. Lynchings are a method of terror used by white supremacists and historically used from the slave ships to the plantations to big cities all the way to voting booths. They are meant to show that no matter how much we fight, no matter what we win, they can still kill us with no justice. But no matter how many freedom fighters and innocent people they cut down, the Freedom March will not stop. The generations of lynched African youth and lynched freedom fighters shows us that we must shed our fear and stay in the streets until we've won a new society. Those who move in the darkness will be brought to light, and justice will be won by the mass struggle. The community is demanding an independent investigation into the sheriffs because criminals shouldn't be allowed to investigate themselves. The PSL stands in solidarity with the community of Palmdale in their quest for truth. We demand justice for Robert Fuller in Palmdale, as well as Malcolm Harsh in Victorville, California. We will keep fighting and we'll keep organizing until precious lives like Oluwatoyin Salau, Richard Brooks, Dominique Fells, and James Scurlock are safe from violence and our people are liberated. Power to the people, and thank you.